Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to part 2 of Inspector Calls. Right, this weird feeling that I've missed something out here. Forgotten to do something, but I don't know what it is. Hi Dominica. The regulars are in. Right, hello everybody. So, let's get cracking. We've been introduced to, well, the Burling family and Gerald, and we've seen what Priestley thinks of them. Priestley don't like them. Remember, this is a political play. He is trying to say that people who are just selfish and look after themselves are wrong, and we should have more of a sense of community, and if we don't develop that, then we'll all suffer as a consequence. It shows you, doesn't it, that humankind doesn't change. It's as relevant an argument now as it was when this play was written 80 years ago. So, we've been introduced to the main characters. Okay, toilet roll time. Oh god, I'm sad. Mr. Burling, remember, he's the father of the family. He's pompous and arrogant. He's just done this big speech telling them how it'll all be fine and there'll be no war and progress will continue and the Titanic's this amazing new thing that'll never sink. Mrs. Burling, his wife. Now remember, Mr. Burling is keen to climb socially, and you'll see him say in a moment, actually, Mrs. Burling is a bit posher than him. So, you know, she's part of it. He marries sort of above himself to give himself more respectability. We've got their children. Sheila, who is getting married to Gerald. Remember, he gave her the engagement ring yesterday. Gerald is posher than the Burlings as well, and Burling and Gerald's dad seem to be in the same type of business, and this sounds almost like it's a bit of a business deal as much as a marriage. Burling's saying that they'll be able to combine now and drive wages down and push prices up and make even more money. Burling's got another child, Eric, who Sheila says is a bit squiffy, a little bit drunk. Those are the characters we've met so far, although of course my personal favourite, Edna the maid, who has said 2 words so far, and will get to about double figures by the end of the book. Bless her. So, they just finished their meal. Traditional sexist stuff then, where the women have gone off to one room to talk about women things, while men talk about serious things. Although it's a little symbolic moment that Eric is called by Mrs. Burling to go with the women. She wants a word with him. He will be back with the men in a bit. Maybe she wants a word with him because he's a bit excitable because he's had a bit to drink. But having said that, like I said, it's a bit symbolic. Don't you feel Burling's treating Gerald more like his son than he's treating Eric? He talks down to Eric, he talks to Gerald with more respect, and I think it is sort of symbolic and deliberate by Priestley. You know, Eric isn't immediately with the men, and you'll see this play out in the next couple of minutes. So the women go to one room, the men, Gerald and Burling, are left in the other room. Cigar. that wasn't Burling, was it? That was Al Capone. Cigar. I'll try again. Cigar. No thanks, I can't really enjoy them. I don't know what you're missing. He said as he threw himself to his death. Sorry, that's not part of the plot. I like a good cigar. Help yourself to the port. Burling lights his cigar. Gerald, who's lit a cigarette, helps himself to port and then pushes the decanter to Burling. So, you know, cigars and port after the meal, you know, wealthy people. And I was talking confidentially now, Burling, like, oh, I'm letting you in on a secret. By the way, there's something I'd like to mention, in strict confidence while we're by ourselves. I have an idea that your mother, Lady Croft, while she doesn't object to my girl, feels you might have done better for yourself socially. Gerald's trying to say, oh, no. No, Gerald, that's all right. Don't blame her. She comes from an old county family, landed people and so forth, so it's only natural. What I wanted to say is, there's a fair chance that I might find my way into the next honours list. Just a knighthood, of course. Oh, I see. Congratulations. Thanks. It's a bit too early for that. So don't say anything. But I've had a hint or two. You see, I was Lord Mayor here 2 years ago when royalty visited us, and I've always been regarded as a sound, useful party man. So, well, I gather there's a very good chance of a knighted. So long as we behave ourselves, don't get into any police court or start a scandal, eh? You seem a very well-behaved family to me. Or we think we are. So, if that's the only obstacle, sir, I think you might as well accept my congratulations now. Thank you. No, I couldn't do that. And don't say anything yet. Alright, so, this search for position in society, this desire that Burling has to be respected and to climb and be accepted as upper class and, you know, the head of an important family. He was the mayor, we've just seen there, when the king came, so he was, you know, getting to make friends in the right places, and as a result he thinks he's going to get a knighted. You'll have seen this twice a year. The Queen gives people honours, which, you know, if you think about it, it's quite a weird idea, isn't it? It goes back to ancient times, you know, knights in shining armour sort of thing. If you're the king and you take over, you want to keep important people on your side, so you give them land and titles and importance. Yeah, if you're William the Conqueror and you invade England, all right, you've won the battle, you've declared yourself king, but what if the rest of the country don't like you? Well, why not give all of Cornwall, well, maybe Cornwall's a bit far away, all of Sussex to one of your mates or a local British person who you think you can trust, and give them money and a title, and then they'll be loyal to you forever. And it all come from that. So now you get like celebrities being given awards, you know, Sir Alex Ferguson and Dame Kelly Holmes, Dame Judi Dench, Lord Alan Sugar. Yeah, so being given these titles. So Burling says he's going to get a knighthood, yeah, made into a knight, so it'll be Sir Arthur Burling, and that will establish how important I am. So, Gerald, of course, it's relevant for Burling because he's saying that, you know, I know your mum, Gerald, thinks that we may be a bit below you, but I'll be a knight soon, so that'll help. So hang on. Sorry, I thought I'd finish that section. There's a couple more lines. I say, could I say something to my mother about this? I know she'd be delighted. Well, when she comes back, you might drop a hint to her. I'm having a breakdown. Eric enters. What's up? Started telling your stories yet? No. Want to look at our support? Yes, please. He takes the decanter and helps himself. Mother says we mustn't stay too long, but I don't think it matters. I left them talking about clothes again. You'd think a girl had never had any clothes before she gets married. Women are potty about them. Yes, but you've got to remember, my boy, that clothes mean something quite different to a woman. Not just something to wear, and not only something to make them look prettier, but, well, a sort of sign or a token of their self-respect. That's true. Yes, I remember. And then he stops himself. Well, what do you remember? Nothing. Nothing? Sounds a bit fishy to me. And Burling takes it in the same way, so just think about this for a second. Eric is the son, but Burling seems to talk to Gerald as if he's the son. And now here they are, ganging up against Eric. Eric said a slightly unusual thing there. He comes in all naive and, oh, I don't understand. Women, they talk about clothes. And, oh, gosh, I don't understand it. And he is indeed a bit sexist. Accurate comment. But then he says that odd little thing when Burling goes off on another pompous mansplaining speech, doesn't he? About, oh, they're important to women. Clothes are important to women. That's sexist too, of course. And Eric suddenly goes, yeah, oh yeah, I remember. And then stops himself. So like he's got something to hide. He did know a woman once. So, yeah, I just think it's somewhat symbolic that... Not symbolic, I think it's revealing, rather, that Burling and Gerald are the ones who sort of gang up and make fun of him. Yeah, so Gerald says, oh, it seems fishy, and now Burling's going to join in. Yeah, You don't know what some of these boys get up to nowadays. More money to spend and time to spare than I had when I was Eric's age. They worked us hard in those days and kept us short of cash. And even then we broke out in our bit of fun sometimes. I'll bet you did. But this is the point. I don't want to lecture you two young fellas again. When people say that, they're always going to lecture you. Just like, no offence. If someone says no offence, they're about to offend you. Fact. Right, so, Berlin, goon. Sorry. Lost my page. This is the point. I don't want to lecture you to young fellas again. What so many of you don't seem to understand now, and things are so much easier, is that a man has to make his own way, has to look after himself, and his family too, of course, when he has one. And so long as he does that, he won't come to much harm. But the way some of these cranks talk and write now, you'd think everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we were all mixed up together like bees in a hive. A man has to mind his own business and look after himself and his own, and just as he's saying that, there's the sharp ring of a doorbell. Bring! Burling stops. That speech is a big un for the exams. This sums up Burling's points. Yeah, he is the opposite of Priestley. He does not believe, he is not a socialist. Remember, socialists who feel that everybody should try and work for the benefit of everyone else. We should share. Burling, no. You look after yourself, you make your own money, and you just look after yourself and your family. And that's that. Yeah, as he said that, a man has to make his own way, has to look after himself and his family too. As long as he does that, he won't come to much harm. Then he talks about the opposites, that people like Priestley, and as we said yesterday, H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw. Yeah, he says these cranks, the way they talk, exactly. Yes, every man for himself. Yes, these cranks who think we should all support each other. He said you'd think everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we're all mixed up together like bees in a hive. Yeah, so he says that's ridiculous, stupid, like we're all mixed up together. And he just emphasises his point. Man's got to mind his own business, look after himself and his own. And then, just at that point, when he makes his big statement about being selfish, the doorbell stops him. Somebody at the front door. All right, Eric. Edna will answer it. We'll have another glass of port, Gerald, and then we'll join the ladies. That'll stop me giving you good advice. Yes, you've piled it on a bit tonight, Father. Special occasion. I'm feeling contented for once. I wanted you to have the benefit of my experience. Modest. Do you know, so he said that to Gerald? Have another drink, Gerald, and we'll join the ladies. Again, that sort of feeling that he's out to impress Gerald. Respect Eric in the same way. Are we ready? Are we ready for our favourite? Here she comes. Here she comes. Edna. Please, sir. Yes? An inspector's called. An inspector? What kind of inspector? Police inspector. He says his name's Inspector Gould. Don't know him. Does he want to see me? Yes, sir. He says it's important. All right, Edna. Show him in here. Off goes Edna. Oh, man, she was good, wasn't she? Maybe something about a warrant. I'm still on the bench. See, he's got all these little roles that he takes to make himself feel important in society. He's a magistrate. If you're on the bench, you're a magistrate. Yeah? So a magistrate basically is a local person who for free will work as a sort of judge in less important cases. So if you are done for, say, shoplifting, you'd probably go to the magistrates' court. And there'll be 3 magistrates who are not judges, but they've done lots of legal training, and they're working for free. St. Joseph's old deputy head, she used to be a magistrate, for example. So people who are, you know, sort of got some sort of status in society, have done the training, and then they will make a judgment, which will be obviously guilty or innocent. They can give small punishments. They can't give big punishments. So if they think, oh, this crime actually, now I've heard it, is more serious than was first thought, then they'll have to pass it on to an actual court with a judge. Although I've got to say, I'm slightly confused, and I need to look this up. I read a headline the other day about a magistrate sending someone to jail. I thought they couldn't do that. I thought that was that'd be something I have to pass on. So I'll have to check out on that. But certainly, Burling's taken that sort of role to build up his importance. Yeah, he was mayor. He's going to get a knighthood. He's a magistrate, so he thinks that the police officers come to get him to do some paperwork. Yeah. And then the wind-up continues. Gerald. Eric's probably been up to something. And he nods towards Burling. That would be awkward, wouldn't it? Remember, Burling said, I will get my knighthood as long as there's nothing bad, no scandal. But there's this arrogant, pompous sense amongst them of, yeah, but we're the rich, the powerful. We don't have bad things happen to us. The poor people can have it happen to them, but we're the respectable people in society. Yeah? So they're laughing. Imagine us getting into trouble. Yeah? So that'd be awkward, wouldn't it? Very. Eric's uncomfortable. Here, what do you mean? Only something we were talking about before you came in. A joke, really. I don't think it's very funny. What's the matter with you? Nothing. Wait for it. Edna opens the door and announces, Inspector Gould. And in comes the inspector. Now, there's a decent length of description here, and it's relevant. There's a temptation for pupils to want to sort of ignore stage directions. Don't ignore the stage directions. Certainly not in this. He knows what he's on about. He knows what he's on. What the hell is that supposed to be? Priestley is giving us a lot of information in the stage directions, and here he describes the inspector. He doesn't describe him in detail, because obviously it depends on the actor, doesn't it? And he does acknowledge that at the start when he says the inspector need not be a big man, but then he tells us his vision for the inspector. Okay, and these are good notes to take for the starting point about the inspector. He need not be a big man, but he creates at once an impression of massiveness, solidity, and purposefulness. He's a man in his 50s, dressed in a plain, darkish suit of the period. Yeah, so straight away, massiveness, solidity, and purposefulness are what he projects. This man has enormous presence. He walks in, and it feels like he's in control. This is usually where I go off at a tangent and tell stupid examples. I'll give you very, very quickly. Apologies, any year 10s out there, because I've done this quite recently with you. When I do the football commentating at Wrexham, there have been occasions when, you do like the interviews after the match, and somebody comes in who has a real sense of presence, like this. Tony Adams used to be England's captain, and he was manager of Wycombe unsuccessfully for a bit. And I remember him walking in, and the moment he walked into the room where they do the interviews, everyone's quiet and silently gathers around him, and he's just this big man in the middle of the room, and everyone's listening closely to everything he says. He's got presence. The sort of teacher who, you're all you're all in a classroom having a chat, and then there's a type of teacher, the one with authority, who can walk in, say nothing, and the room goes quiet. Yeah, that sort of personality. It says he's dressed in a plain darkish suit, so there's nothing remarkable about him. He always blends into the background. He speaks carefully, weightily, and has a disconcerting habit of looking hard at the person he addresses before actually speaking. So he doesn't waste any words. Everything he says feels important, and he disconcerts people, makes people feel uncomfortable by looking hard at the person he addresses before actually speaking. So, look into the centre of your screen. I'm going to speak to you now. And what do you mean by that? See what I mean? It's just awkward. He's got brilliant presence. Funny enough, I was talking to my dad, who was an English teacher, was head of English in what is now Clwydog. It wasn't, it was Bryn Offa then. And I said to him I was doing this. He said, I taught this so many times, he was saying. And we were talking about different actors playing the inspector that we'd seen. There was a school trip a few years ago to see the Inspector Calls, a very famous production. An amazing set. The whole set was an enormous house that opened up like a doll's house. It was incredible. There was a bit where it rained, and there was actual rain on the stage. I mean, it was amazing. And it was a really famous performance that toured around Britain and has been in London for a long time. And everyone loved it, except me. I was impressed. But there was something crucial that was wrong, which was the inspector. I thought was terrible. The actor playing the inspector. He just kept going around shouting all the time. Again, think of teachers. The teachers who are shouting all the time have not got control and authority. The teachers who don't need to shout all the time who have got the control and authority. The inspector is not supposed to be running around going, "Arr!" The inspector is just a strong presence. You can't knock him off his stride. Right, I've built him up enough. He's awesome. Let's meet him. Here he comes. Whoop. Mr. Burling? Good evening, Inspector. You're new, aren't you? Yes, sir. Only recently transferred. I thought you must be. I was an alderman for years and Lord Mayor 2 years ago, and I'm still on the bench, so I know the Bromley police officers pretty well, and I thought I'd never seen you before. Quite so. Right, okay. Just think about what Burling did then. He's met a person for the first time, and he has this desire to impress everybody, to make people see him as important, maybe to intimidate them as well. And so the first thing he says to him was, I was Lord Mayor, I'm still on the bench, and I was an alderman for years. An alderman is a person who's added to the local council to represent a group in society that aren't represented. So, for example, say, obviously in Wrexham there's quite a large Polish population. What if there was no Polish councillor? So that community in Wrexham didn't have a voice on the local council. So you could then add an alderman, which would be somebody chosen from the Polish community, to represent everybody. Does that make sense? So an alderman is an unelected representative on a council to represent a group of people who are not being represented. So who the hell Burling is representing? This is probably more of a sort of political, you know, I want to be an important man, make me an alderman sort of thing. Who's you representing? Pompous idiots. So anyway, he's shown off. He hasn't impressed the inspector. Yes, sit down, Inspector. Thank you, sir. Have a glass of port or a little whiskey. No, thank you, Mr. Burling. I'm on duty. Well, what can I do for you? Some trouble about a warrant? No, Mr. Burling. Well, what is it then? I'd like some information, if you don't mind, Mr. Burling. 2 hours ago, a young woman died in the infirmary. She'd been taken there this afternoon because she'd swallowed a lot of strong disinfectant. Burnt her inside out, of course. My God. Yes, she was in great agony. They did everything they could for her at the infirmary, but she died. Suicide, of course. Yes, horrible business. But I don't understand why I should come here, Inspector. Can I just point out the difference in reactions there? This girl has killed herself horrifically, yeah? She's drunk strong disinfectant. Maybe she was a Donald Trump supporter, who knows? Pause for the laughter to die down. That bloke's president of America, and he's telling people to drink disinfectant, and people do it. So, the girl has died because she drank disinfectant. She's killed herself. When the inspector tells them about this horrific suicide, Eric's immediate reaction is, oh my God, oh, it's awful. He immediately feels for the girl. Burling's reaction is, oh yeah, it's horrible. Rather impatiently the direction. Oh yeah. You know, but what's it got to do with me? Yeah? So Eric, to be fair to him, reacts as a decent human being. And Burling sticks to his word. He only cares about himself. So he said, oh, what's with me? But then the inspector cuts across him. The inspector's in control. Sorry, Miss Tompkins, I stole your joke. But look at that. The inspector is this huge, strong, powerful figure. Just interrupts Burling. Burling's not going to like that in his own house. He's a self-important man, isn't he? I've been round to the room she had, and she left a letter there and a sort of diary. Like a lot of these young women who get into various kinds of trouble, she'd used more than one name. But her original name, her real name, was Eva Smith. Eva Smith. Do you remember her, Mr. Burling? No. I seem to remember hearing that name, Eva Smith, somewhere. But it doesn't convey anything to me. And I don't see where I come into this. She was employed in your works at one time. Oh, that's it, is it? Well, we've several hundred young women there, you know, and they keep changing. This young woman, Eva Smith, was a bit out of the ordinary. I found a photograph of her in her lodgings. Perhaps you'd remember her from that? Burling crosses to a lamp and the inspector stands there to show him the picture. Gerald and Eric get up as well. Gerald walks across and the inspector stops him. So the inspector takes a photograph out of his pocket, shows it to Burling. Yeah? Both Gerald and Eric try to see the photo, but the inspector steps in the way and they're surprised and annoyed. Burling stares hard and with recognition at the photograph, which Gerald then places in his pocket. Burling places in his pocket, sorry. Any particular reason why I shouldn't see this girl's photograph, Inspector? There might be. The same applies to me, I suppose. Yes. Can't imagine what it could be. Neither can I. And I must say, I agree with them, Inspector. It's the way I like to go to work. One person and one line of inquiry at a time. Otherwise, there's a muddle. I see. Alright. So, the inspector shows Burling a photo of the girl, but he won't show the other two. And that's a brilliant line in it, Gerald. Is there any reason why I can't scout photograph? The inspector just is at the stage direction, coolly looking hard at him. There might be. He's not scared of these posh people, is he? Yeah? And he says the same to Eric. Now then, the inspector explains when they're not happy, I like to keep things simple. One line of inquiry at a time. Speak to one person, get my information, then go on to another person. This will give the plot a very clear structure, which helps you for revision purposes, because you will see there are very clear sections of this play which you will see. There are very clear bits to focus on for characters that you will see. So it's a very simple structure for revision. Anyway, Burling has a quick pop at Eric. I think you've had enough of that port, Eric. But now, all the way along, when Burling's snapping at Eric, the inspector's just staring at him. Because Burling recognised her, didn't he? I think you remember Eva Smith now, don't you, Mr. Burling? Yes, I do. She was one of my employees, and then I discharged her, and so we sacked her. Is that why she committed suicide? When was this, Father? Just keep quiet, Eric, and don't get excited. This girl left us nearly 2 years ago. Let me see, it must have been the early autumn of 1910. Yes, end of September 1910. That's right. Look here, sir, would you rather I was out of this? Gerald sort of... Ooh, should I stay out of this conversation? Should I leave, Mr. Burling? I don't mind you being here, Gerald. I'm sure you've no objection, have you, Inspector? Oops, I beg your pardon, Inspector. Perhaps I ought to explain first that this is Mr. Gerald Croft, son of Sir George Croft. You know, Crofts Limited. Mr. Gerald Croft? Yes, incidentally, we've been modestly celebrating his engagement to my daughter, Sheila. I see. Mr. Croft is going to marry Miss Sheila Burling. I hope so. Then I prefer you to stay. Oh, all right. Well, again, this feels a bit suspicious, doesn't it? This doesn't feel like a routine police officer coming around to check with an employer if he knew anything about this girl. You know, you're Gerald Crofts, who's marrying Sheila Burling. Well, I'd have you stay then. Ooh, hello. Burling's not impressed. Look, there's nothing mysterious about this business, at least not so far as I'm concerned. It's a pretty straightforward case, and as it happened more than 18 months ago, nearly 2 years ago, obviously has nothing whatsoever to do with a wretched girl's suicide. Eh, Inspector? No, sir. I can't agree with you there. Why not? Because what happened to her then may have determined what happened to her afterwards. What happened to her afterwards may have driven her to suicide. A chain of events. Oh, well, Put like that, there's something in what you say. Still, I can't accept any responsibility. If we were all responsible for everything that happened to everybody we'd had anything to do with, it'd be very awkward, wouldn't it? Very awkward. See the point there, Burling? Okay, I understand you want to trace her story back, but I've got no responsibility for this. If we were all responsible for everything that happened to everyone we had contact with, life would become very awkward. And this rather sarcastic response by the inspector, very awkward. Obviously, Priestley's point is you should look after everyone else. You should respect everyone else. Yeah? We'd all be in an impossible situation, wouldn't we? By Jove, yes. And as you were saying, Dad, a man has to look after himself. Yes, well, we didn't go into all that. Go into what? Oh, just before you came, I've been giving these young men a little good advice. Now, about this girl, Eva Smith. I remember her quite well now. She was a lively, good-looking girl, country-bred, I fancy, and she'd been working in one of our machine shops for over a year. A good worker, too. In fact, the foreman there told me that he was ready to promote her into what we called a leading operator, head of a small group of girls. But after they come back from their holidays that August, they were all rather restless, and they suddenly decided to ask for more money. They were averaging about 22 shillings, which was neither more nor less than is paid generally in our industry. They wanted the rates raised so they could average about 25 shillings a week. I refused, of course. Why? What? Did you say why? Yes. Why did you refuse? Well, Inspector, I don't see it's any concern of yours how I choose to run my business, is it now? Might be, you know. I don't like that tone. Sorry, but you asked me a question. And you asked me a question too. Before that, a quite unnecessary question too. It's my duty to ask questions. Well, it's my duty to keep labour costs down. And if I'd agreed to this demand for a new rate, we'd have added about 12% to our labour costs. Does that satisfy you? So I refused. Said I couldn't consider it. We were paying the usual rates, and if they didn't like those rates, they could go and work somewhere else. It's a free country, I told them. He sits down. Woo. It isn't if you can't go and work somewhere else. Quite so. Look, just you keep out of this. You hadn't even started in the works when this happened. So they went on strike. That didn't last long, of course. Hang on, Gerald's there. Trying to jump for freedom. Not if it was just after the summer holidays. They'd all be broke if I knew them. Right, Gerald. They mostly were, and so was the strike after a week or two. Pitiful affair. Well, we forgive them. We let them all come back, at the old rates, except the 4 or 5 ringleaders who'd started the trouble. I went down myself and told them to clear out. And this girl, Eva Smith, was one of them. She'd had a lot to say, I remember. Far too much, so she had to go. You couldn't really have done anything else. You could. You could have kept her on instead of throwing her out. I'd call it tough luck. Rubbish. If you don't come down sharply on some of these people, they'd soon be asking for the earth. I should say so. They might. But after all, it's better to ask for the earth than to take it. Oh. So, Burling sacked the girl. The girl was working in the factory, and they were getting poor wages, so they went on strike, and she was one of the leaders of the strike. So what they did basically was starve them out. It was just after their summer holidays. They've come back. They've not been paid over the holidays. They come back. They soon run out of money, because when you're on strike, you're not getting paid. And so basically, Burling just sits her out, and then when they all need work, they all come back. He lets them back, except for the 4 or 5 leaders of the strike, including Eva Smith, the girl. He sacks them to make an example of them. Now, Eric, I noticed, is sticking up for the girl. Gerald is sticking up for Burling. Yeah, Burling, you couldn't have done anything else. Eric saying, you know, it's not fair. You didn't have to sack them. Also, Burling saying we were paying the usual rates, and if you don't like them, they can go and work somewhere else. It's a free country. And Eric said it isn't if you can't go and work somewhere else, because essentially that was the sort of situation then. You know, I mean, work was tight. If you didn't have any money, there was no benefits. You either starve or you go into a poorhouse. So there aren't many options if you haven't got a job. You can get sacked as Burling did there, with no reason. There was no contract law then. Unions were only just starting up to protect workers' rights. And so basically you could just get sacked and that's that. You better find another job fast. Burling could spread around that she's a troublemaker, so it's impossible to find a job. So, yeah, he's kicked her out, yeah? The inspector is pushing it, isn't he? Burling expects everyone to grovel to him. But when Burling says if you don't come down sharply on these people, they'll soon be asking for the earth, the inspector said they might, but it's better to ask for the earth than to take it. That's a dig at Burling, isn't it? Yeah? They're asking for the earth. You're just taking it for yourself. Burling don't like that. I'm going to stop in a sec. Hang on. The rare two-handed approach to drinking there. I just want to get to the end of the section. Burling isn't impressed, so he's staring at the inspector and he stands up. What did you say your name was, Inspector? Ghoul. Ghoul. How'd you get on with our Chief Constable, Colonel Roberts? I don't see much of him. Perhaps I ought to warn you that he's an old friend of mine, and I see him fairly frequently. We play golf together sometimes up at West Bromley. I don't play golf. I didn't suppose you did. Well, I think it's a damn shame. No, I've never wanted to play. And there you are, J.B. Priestley's joke, yeah? Burling trying to intimidate the inspector. Do you know Chief Constable Colonel Roberts? He's my mate. He's your boss. He's my mate. We play golf together. And the inspector said, I don't play golf. Dryly, the instruction. Like, you're not intimidating me, mate. I don't play your posh man's game. And then Burling says, don't suppose you did. And Eric's upset about the girl. I think it's a damn shame. The inspector, I never wanted to play golf. Priestley's joke. But Eric didn't mean that, did he? He meant about the girl. No, I meant about this girl, Eva Smith. Why shouldn't they try for higher wages? We try for highest possible prices, and I didn't see why she should have been sacked just because she's got a bit more spirit than the others. You said yourself she was a good worker. I'd have let her stay. He steps towards Eric. Unless you brighten up your ideas, you'll never be in a position to let anybody stay or tell anybody to go. It's about time you learn to face a few responsibilities. There's something this public school and varsity life you've had doesn't seem to have taught. Well, you don't need to tell the inspector all about that, do we? So yeah, I've paid for you to go to a public school, posh school. I've paid for you to go to university, varsity, and you've gone to one of the best universities, Cambridge or Oxford, and you're soft, and you need to learn about the real world, he says. Yeah? And Burling walks to the inspector. I don't see we need to tell the inspector anything more, in fact. There's nothing I can tell him. I told the girl to clear out and she went. That's the last I heard of it. Have you any idea what happened to her afterwards? Get into trouble? Go on the streets? No, she didn't exactly go on the streets. Sheila has entered. Yay. She comes to Burling. What's this about streets? And then she sees the inspector. Oh, sorry, I didn't know. Mummy sent me in to ask why you didn't come to the drawing room. I'll be along in a minute now. Just finishing. I'm afraid not. There's nothing else, you know. I've just told you that. What's all this about? Nothing to do with you, Sheila. Run along. No, wait a minute, Miss Burling. Oh, okay. Sexist, isn't it? You're the little girl. Run along. Don't get worried in important matters. Inspector tells her to stop. Burling's not happy. Look here, Inspector, I consider this uncalled for and officious. I've half a mind to report you. I've told you all I know, and it doesn't seem to me very important. And now there isn't the slightest reason why my daughter should be dragged into this unpleasant business. And that's the point where we'll stop. Unpleasant business halts for the day, but there will be more unpleasant business tomorrow. Remember the usual drill? I'll leave the stream going for a bit if you want to ask any questions. Pardon me. So, feel free to do so, and then tomorrow, 10:30, we'll get going, okay? I say about the structure being useful for revision purposes, we've just had a big key chunk of what you need to know about Burling. So, because the inspector wants to take a line of inquiry at a time, this play does break up into parts. So there's quite a lot of important stuff about Burling in there, and a bit before where he's a pompous idiot making speeches, okay? So, thank you very much, everyone. As always, I really enjoy doing this. I'm sad, aren't I? I might take requests for the next one. Stone Cold. I'm thinking about Stone Cold. There's a book. There's a book. Okie dokie. Right, I'll pop the post stream on for a bit. Adios, muchachos.